Hey guys, Kriben Govender from the Gut Health Gurus podcast. I've got a background in food science, and today I have a very interesting conversation. We've got a guy, an Aussie guy. His name is George. He's got an amazing project called ZenApe, and I'm really fascinated to explore the whole connection between the evolution of people moving more online and how it impacts mental health, but also some other very interesting topics. So, George, firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
George, what I like to do at the start of all my shows is to ask the question, who is George?
Who is George? I am, who am I? I guess I'm George, but I'm not. I'm like nobody, but I'm George. I guess in what aspect are you asking that question?
It's a very
Such
open,
a broad question.
it is a broad
Yeah.
question. It's very open, and it's really up to the guest to tell the audience a bit about themselves. So you can be as broad and esoteric as you like, or you can be as specific as you like. But firstly, what do you do? What's your background? What's the project all about that you're working on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a background in real estate, and I moved into stocks. Then I moved into crypto, and then I moved into NFTs. I think since maybe July 2021. So, I mean, when I first heard about NFTs, I was kind of like, I thought it was a bit weird and it didn't make a lot of sense, especially like, the whole crypto punks selling for millions of dollars and the Beeple NFT selling for like, I don't know how many millions, like tens of millions. And um, I started with Axie Infinity, and I learned a lot about it. And then I started to realize the potential of NFTs and that underlying technology and its potential. Yeah, and from Axie, I went into more NFTs. The first one I went into was Cyberkongs, and during that time in Kongs, I learned a lot more about NFTs in general. Made a lot of investments as well as a lot of speculative plays. So made money there, lost money there. All in all, it's a good learning experience. Yeah. And then from then, it was like, okay, we've learned so much about NFTs and observed so much. So, let's just play around. Let's have some fun. Let's do some stuff, right? So, that one thing led to another, and that led to ZenApes, which is the project that I co-founded, one of 5 co-founders. And that happened rather spontaneously. There was no, it wasn't exactly like planned out. Okay, like, hey, let's make our own NFT and mint it out, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't quite like that. It was more like, okay, let's do something cool, do something fun. So once we did that, then we wanted to give it a reason for existence. As the French would say, raison d'être, something like that. So what it is, how we would define ZenApes is a community focused brand and Web 3.0 masternode. So, we want to welcome people in general. We have a philosophy of openness. So for us, it's about collaboration and not competition. Like, for example, when generally speaking, we're not afraid to share our ideas. We're not concerned about being front run and stuff like that. There's a lot of a lot of projects out there are very siloed. Like they keep everything to themselves and it's very insular. We try to take the more balanced approach of being, just open-minded and open to people in general, open to builders, to innovators, and to just chill Zen people. I mean, the motto of the project is wisdom, virtue, and mindfulness. You can see that in the OpenSea description. And hopefully that's also reflected by the behavior of or ZenApes of the founders and of the mods and all community members in general.
Amazing. So audience members, they're probably perhaps confused with some of the terminologies, but we'll really dig into NFTs, what NFT is, what OpenSea is, because the audience, I'm sure this is going to blow a lot of minds, because this information is very cutting edge in terms of where the technology is headed. But what really fascinated me personally in talking to George is the whole impact of social media, and just the last couple of years going through a pandemic and more people moving onto the social media space, going online, and what the impact on mental health is. Is it evolving? Is it something that's become, more prevalent? Certainly for myself, going through the lockdown, I had huge mental health challenges with the isolation aspects. But then it also adds to the complexity of people spending more time online. So, George, what's your thoughts on this past couple of years? And then what do you think from your own personal experiences being the impact on mental health for people across the world?
Oh, sheesh. I think it's, I think this whole COVID thing has been very much like a crucible, like a furnace for people. Some people have adapted well to it, and others have not adapted very well from it to it. And you can see that's very much reflected in the overall psyche of the collective of the human race in general. So when I say that, I mean, like, some people feel the isolation. Normally they'd be very outgoing, for example, drinks with friends, social events, raves, whatever, right? So, and then all of a sudden it's like they're just trapped at home due to all of the enforced lockdowns and isolations and all of that. So, and they just and humans do tend to be social creatures, so they do become like sad and anxious and whatnot, and that's completely to be expected. And then you have people that are like, okay, so obviously this is not a nice situation, but when you get lemons, you make lemonade from it. So because you're isolated, gives you a lot more time to, I don't know, to meditate, to reflect, to think of new possibilities, and to shut out a lot of the previous old noise, and maybe learn a thing or two. When you take up a language, learn about new tech, stuff like that. I mean, and for me, like clearly, I played quite a few video games during isolation, but I also took the opportunity to read a lot more and to do like you know meditation, stuff like that, and also learn a lot about NFTs and the underlying potential and technology, and to meet a lot of people um, online as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, George. I think the isolation aspect has forced people to really go introspectively, and those who are natural introverts, if you like, for want of a better word, would perhaps be more acclimatized to spending time in solitude. But I feel for the people that really draw a lot of power from being around others and spending time with friends, with family. I think that would be more of a struggle. Me personally, being an introvert, it was still very tough. But I feel for the people that really need to draw power from others and the impact that isolation has had on them. Now, another interesting segue, George, is the metaverse, because I think we're starting to see that as people move more online, so more people are spending more time on social media. So you've got a couple of different interesting buzzwords, if you like, that we can explore, and perhaps with your expertise, I think let's start with some definitions. So how about we define Web3, we define metaverse, and then we define NFTs. So with your expertise, how would you define these three very important online developments?
Well, the metaverse is, let's start off with the metaverse, which I think is the most popular buzzword. So the metaverse is basically like a virtual reality. It's basically a new layer of reality that's generated by human technology. So it's kind of like it's very much like the like games that we used to play that I think people still play, like I think called Second Life or World of Warcraft, games like that. But now this time it's all kind of interlinked with each other. So stuff like World of Warcraft, and all those different online MMORPGs, they're siloed from each other and they're on their own centralized separate servers. But in the metaverse, it's like you have everything interconnected with each other into a web way of ownership as well. So you can think of the metaverse as being a new layer of reality that's interlinked with each other in a vast web way comprised of, ownership and new experiences, people in general. Yeah. I think there's a better way of putting it, but that's a good start, I think. Yeah.
That sounds really apt. I think it's always for the audience, like if you've watched the movie Ready Player One, that's probably
Yeah.
a good sort of example of people transitioning onto some sort of online life, online identity. And I think it's going to have huge implications on how humans interact, but also opportunities for development of these kind of almost online wellness retreats, wellness worlds. And this is what I see ZenApe being, a community of people through an NFT acquisition, being part of a community that's really encouraging mindfulness, encouraging wellness, all those sort of healthy elements of life, but in an online space. And I think just to explain, it's also Discord that's really popular, where the community actually interacts with these NFTs and their utility. So what's the next one, George? What should we define next?
Oh yeah, Web3. Let's go with that. So, I mean, Web3. So I guess you could start with just going back. So Web1 is kind of like read only. So like a news website, something like that. Information is uploaded. You consume it, you read it. That's it. There's not much interaction there. Web2 is kind of like those big, Web2 companies like Instagram, Facebook. You can like stuff, you can upload stuff, you can comment on things, you can interact with things, and it's all on these centralized databases that achieve these very powerful network effects. Web3, on the other hand, is a evolution in the direction of decentralization. So the difference here, it has all the elements of Web1 and Web2, but now the control, the governance, the stakeholders, the share in revenue, all of it is decentralized and split apart between many, many people, players, or stakeholders. I would say that to me is Web3. Yeah.
And we're moving towards more of so people would have heard or starting to hear about cryptocurrencies, to hear about things like Bitcoin that are becoming very popular and more mainstream. So, George, how does the cryptocurrencies then dovetail into Web3?
Well, cryptocurrencies are a use of Web3 technology. So everything, like all of this NFT, like cryptocurrency, all these things are all backed by the underlying blockchain technology, which can be used in many, many different ways. So it can be used for cryptocurrency. It can be used for NFTs. And actually, NFTs are basically cryptocurrency, but this time it's non-fungible, meaning that each NFT is different. But for cryptocurrencies, all cryptocurrencies within a certain cryptocurrency are the same. Like one Bitcoin is the same as another Bitcoin. but not for NFTs. Like one NFT is different from another NFT, and hence the term, non-fungible. So non-fungible means that they're different from each other. You can't exchange one for another. But Bitcoin is fungible because you can exchange one Bitcoin for another Bitcoin, easy peasy, no problem, because they're all the same. Doesn't matter which Bitcoin you have. So actually, like all NFTs and all cryptocurrencies are tokens. It's just that NFTs are non-fungible and cryptocurrencies are fungible. Yeah.
Right, that's fascinating. That's a really interesting, simple way to define these very complex terminologies. So, how about we explore more about the essence of ZenApe? So, I know ZenApe's your baby; it's your project. So,
Yeah.
how did your founders, including yourself, come up with this concept to take all these ideas of NFTs, of Web3, of Metaverse, of other elements of these emerging technologies, and then create this ZenApe project?
Yeah, so ZenApes happened rather spontaneously. It just kind of like just naturally happened. And yeah, I mean, we all know each other in real life. We're good friends in real life. 5 co-founders, and we're based in Sydney and Canberra. And yeah, we played around with NFTs and learned a lot about NFTs. And it's like, yeah, okay, let's do some NFT art. And eventually that evolved into, a full-on 5K collection. And then it evolved into giving it uh, a meaning and a reason for existence. And, if we're going to do something, if we're going to do something cool, we may as well, go big or go home, right? Just enlarge the scope of it and do something innovative and fun at the same time.
Was there any particular reason that you chose the mindfulness genre or the wellness genre? Is that something personal between the founders, or was that just an opportunity that you guys wanted to explore in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think the mindfulness and the Zen factor was kind of like a reflection of a lot of lessons we learned from trading in stocks, in crypto, and in NFTs, right? So it's very easy to get caught up in the frenzy, in emotions, right? Whether it be buying into euphoria, like in a bull market, or selling into pessimism in a bear market, things like that, because you're being governed by emotions, you're being controlled by your emotions, and not the other way around. And that is usually, for most investors, the number one mistake and the number one cause of value destruction when he invests his portfolio. So I think the whole mindfulness and Zen factor is like, I think we should embody that and be more Zen and be more mindful and just kind of like be mindful of our emotions, our state, and we will better make optimal decisions, not just for NFTs or crypto or stocks, but for anything in life. Having said that, it's much more easier said than done. So it's always it's a journey. So yeah.
That's an interesting little rabbit hole to jump into. How about, so for yourself, you completely resonate with what you're saying with things like any sort of investing in stocks, trading requires a lot of emotional control, fortitude. So, are there any practices that you apply in your own life to foster this Zen-like mindset?
I think it's discipline. I think for me it's like just discipline. It's very easy to get like stuck into something and just be completely obsessed over it and just sit in front of a screen for like 16 hours a day and develop this kind of like tunnel vision, like myopic vision, and just get caught up in all the emotions, the roiling emotions of markets and market sentiment. But if one can develop, just a little simple thing like a schedule and say, at this time I'll do this, at this time I go to the gym. At this time, I meditate. At this time, I have an ice bath, like whatever it is. At this time, I go hiking, and and schedule, and for this time, I'll be making investment decisions, right? Um, I think this is a much, much more optimal outcome than being on a 16-hour grind, 100 hours a week, and going to bed at 4 a.m., stuff like that. And I think this is also much more sustainable as well. Yeah, I mean, sure, there are lots of people that have gotten good results, as in made a lot of money from doing this kind of crazy grind set, but I don't believe it's sustainable long term for most people. And also, you can be a lot more happy. You can allow yourself to be a lot more happy by having a more balanced life. Yeah.
Completely. And what would be your, say, your top three lifestyle hacks or practices to foster this Zen-like state or feeling of discipline or control, however you want to describe it?
Oh, that's a lot of things, but I'll try and condense it as much as possible into just a few broad principles which um guide the overall habits. And I would say it's kind of like um I think one of the first ones would be I think how you react, like how you perceive things is very important. Like perception, like how you react to news, how you react to what people say, what people write, um, how you react to people's emotions, stuff like that. Is very important. Like framing from at the personal level, how you see reality is very important. As it's said, right? Perception is very important. Uh, Perception is like so important that I think that it's almost as if you control perception, then you can control that. Excuse me. If you can control perception, then you can control reality itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for an older bloke like me, you know, spending more time on social media, I find that a lot of it, I think it's easier for younger people like yourself. But for me, it's so easy to lose almost the translation of what someone is typing in a social media context, because these days people tend to shorthand a lot in social media. So when I look at some of these Discord groups or Twitter, the messaging is really short and sharp in the way the conversation is framed. So it's so easy for people to take offense and be upset about something that's said on social media, because often there is no context, there is no face-to-face interaction. It's just a word salad on the screen. So I completely resonate with what you're saying, is that perception mindset, and to foster a mindset where we can err on the side of positivity. So rather than jump into an assumption of saying or thinking negatively, oh, this person has ill intent, what is the best way we can frame that to have a positive mindset and almost choose positive rather than negative? Because I find myself getting very easily irritated and upset about these short styles of conversation without context, without the face to face, without the body language. And this is just something that is going to be evolving as we move more and more into online interactions. So it's so refreshing to talk to younger people like yourself, because I think you're almost growing up with this. Whereas for older people like myself, I mean, we're used to a certain way of communication, and now we're having to adapt to this new world. Like Discord is like completely new to me. I'm just learning as I'm going, and it's very, very different to other forms of communication. So what's your advice? Because our audience will be on that older sort of spectrum. So what's your advice, George, for older people coming into this online space, into the social media space, as we move on to Web3 and metaverse. What is your advice to help us oldies navigate this very challenging path ahead?
I'd say the first thing is kind of, I know it's very like, as a so-called younger person myself, it's kind of like, but yeah, it's kind of like weird for me to say this, but it's just lose the perception that you're old. That yeah, like not you, but I mean in general. Like I'd say like just lose that perception, and because like ultimately it's not about the age, like young or it doesn't matter. It's just the only thing that matters, much more than those things, is willingness to learn and to adapt to new tech and stuff like that. So that's kind of like age is completely irrelevant to Discord. Yeah. So and I guess like yeah, you're right. Even for me personally, I much prefer face-to-face contact, like meeting people in person, compared to using Discord and chat, especially when it comes to discussing complex and sensitive topics. Like it's just like I really don't like writing long-winded text. Like I try to keep my messages short and snappy. That's it. And yeah, because when it comes to sensitive topics, it's so easy to offend people, even if you're not intending it. You can come off sounding either sarcastic or blunt, excessively blunt or rude when you're not fully not intending to do so. And yeah, that's why there's just like they said, right? I think like 90+% of all human communication is non-verbal, or in this case, non-text. It's not really even the words. It's the eye contact. It's the body language and stuff like that, right? And all of that gets lost in text. So you got to have to adapt to that. And I guess one of the biggest advice I would say is just don't be reactive. Don't get offended by anything. Um, it's the internet is full of douchebags because everyone is anonymous and they feel like they can get away with anything, and they just like shoot from the hip and say what they feel like, and oftentimes it can be very hurtful or feel very hurtful. But just reframe it in that like no, ultimately nobody can hurt you, especially not with words or text. It's you allowing people to hurt you. Yeah.
That's such amazing advice, George. I think it's certainly something we haven't explored on the podcast before. And I think it's just so important as we move more and more towards this online world, fostering that mindset of being almost thick-skinned, if you like, for want of a better word, and almost behaving. My advice would be, I'm always, you can see me. I'm fully doxed. I've got my profile picture. You know exactly who you're talking to. This is me. I've got an online presence, so people know who they're talking to. They can look me up and they know exactly who I am. So I think it's having that etiquette on how we communicate, to almost communicate in a sense like we're talking to someone in face-to-face terms, because it's really difficult to be mean to someone when you're right in front of them. But I think in the online space, when it's anonymous, you don't know who you're talking to, there's trolls, there's bots, there's all sorts of complexities. I think your advice is just spot on, to be really thick-skinned, if you like. Don't take anything to heart. Be non-reactive. You know, these are all these principles of Stoicism and Zen, which is really going to set us up well when we interact in this online space, because it is a minefield, you know, not only for older people, but also for young people, you know, with online bullying and, you know, God forbid, suicides, things like that, when people get into these really tough situations online. So, you know, it's a new frontier. It's almost the Wild West that we're moving into. And I think we just need to be careful and just be good human beings in how we interact online. But of course, I can't control, or George, you can't control how others behave. So the best thing is to just, you know, even at times, just switch off, take a break, get off the online platforms and just go back to nature, you know, things like that. So is that something that resonates with you when it comes to, you know, things like?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like a lot of the times you see something someone replies something to you or writes something that you instantly have a reaction. And now you just got to like even not have those reactions, control your perception, learn to let go of those reactions, don't be reactive. And it normally is the best thing to do is literally just to walk away, do something else. And then later on you'll think like, why the heck was I even like, why did I even have an emotional reaction to that thing in the first place? It's ridiculous, right? But if you
Exactly.
get stuck into it, if you get like bogged down in this nonsense, then it can drag you down. Yeah.
A really good example that I can think of in my own sort of corporate experience is, the corporate lifestyle can be really stressful. It can burn you out. It's very political at times. And a good example is when you have an interaction with a work colleague and it's heated, and sometimes with emails as well. So it's a good way to think about it. How do you send the replies to emails? So at times, you can be really irate and someone can write an email, and that could be a career destroying email. It could be something really terrible. So a good analogy is to really, you're upset, you're heated up. So rather than communicating in that very moment when you're heated, your sympathetic fight or flight response is really kicking off. You really want to get back at the person, or you really want to, get revenge, or however you want to take it. So taking a step back, sometimes it's even, getting a cup of coffee, relaxing, sometimes even sleeping on it, not responding to that email, not responding to that interaction. Obviously, in a work context, you have to respond. So taking a step back and then responding the next day when you're calm, you're clearer, you're more relaxed, you're more logical in your thinking, non-emotional, then you respond. So in a corporate sense, this is some of the techniques that I used to use. But again, the simple thing is maybe not respond at all in some of these online interactions. So, in my own experience as well, we get a lot of trolls, on social media. And sometimes it's just not giving them the air, not feeding the troll. Sometimes it could be just not responding, because you're never going to get everyone to see on the same page as you in every single issue. There's always going to be contention. There's always going to be disagreement. There's always going to be conflict between people. That has been since day one. That's not going to change. Some people are just not going to get along. That's just human nature. So at times, what I think is just not responding. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, not responding is a good option. And I think also, just taking a step back and just, like you said, just sleep on it. And a lot of the times, like even like when you forget about it and your mind is more zen, just more chill and in a healthier spot, like something like a more effective reply can spontaneously pop up, right, in your head. And then you know how to deal with that person in a much more calibrated and optimized way. Yeah, it's kind of like shower thoughts, when like your best ideas come when you're not actually doing that thing. Like when you're in a hike, you're walking on a beach or something like that. It's no different from that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And these are the states of consciousness that you achieve. You're in a hot shower, when you're completely relaxed, when you're in the middle of a very deep meditative practice, or you're out in the forest and you're not stressed out. And this is the place that you want to come from when you're responding to some of these high stakes emails or very important conversations involving conflict. George, this has been such an important conversation. We haven't touched on these mental health implications of social media before. So I really hope that the audience really gets some good tools and techniques that we've provided here today. So George, how about we, as we start to wrap up this episode, how about we talk a little bit about your project? Because just to give the audience a heads up, I'm also part of George's community, the ZenApes, and we're also part of another community called the Cyberkongs, and they're also another amazing NFT community as well. So how about we talk a little bit about your project, ZenApe. So I think so the audience, if they're interested, they can come and explore, some of these ideas with you in your community, the ZenApe community, which is all about your sort of your wellness, your meditation, your Zen practices, and adding other utilities on top of it. So how about we talk about your project and give that a bit of airtime?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess the first place to learn more about ZenApes would be the website. It's a very simple website, zenape.io is where you can learn more. So coming from me, you can, oh yes, and for people who don't necessarily know yet, OpenSea is the main NFT marketplace that's currently used. Yeah, OpenSea.io. And from there, you'll also find ZenApes as well. So basically, what ZenApes is, right? Let's take a step back and discuss about what NFTs are about, or one of their main use cases, right? It's about building communities. So, for example, in Cyberkongs or in ZenApes, right? If I'm a Cyberkong or I'm a ZenApe and Kriben is a Cyberkong or a ZenApe, or she is a Cyberkong or a ZenApe, like we instantly have a connection with each other, right? It's like we already know each other almost, and becoming, further friends is much, much more easier. As an example, right, some of the best friends I've made have been in Cyberkongs or ZenApes. Just talking to them online, mostly text chat, sometimes voice chat as well. And I just over time, just learn more and more about them, and they learn more about me and about our interests, mutual interests. And eventually, you even meet up. Like there was a gentleman that I met in Cyberkongs, who's also in Sydney, and I was like, "Yeah, do you want to hang out?" I'm like, yeah, okay, all good. And we went to this great place in Smithfield, and it was like great. Like when we met, it was like we were already friends. Like we already had a connection there. But I mean, imagine if you were to do this in the traditional world. Like it's weird. Like nobody does that. You don't like randomly meet someone online and go, "Oh, hey, do you want to get lunch?" No, like no, it's weird, right? But like NFT communities are kind of like a way of pre-vetting people to know that these people are like, legit people that you have a lot in common with. Simply by nature of, for example, if you were both drawn to Cyberkongs or ZenApes, then you probably share many similar characteristics in your persona that would have led you to those NFT projects in the first place, right? Yeah. So, and now it's like, I know Cyberkongs and ZenApes from across the world. I know them in United States, a lot of them there, East Coast, West Coast, the South, the North, Northwest, in Europe, in Germany, Poland, in Korea, in Hong Kong, in India, in India, and even in the Middle East as well. And I talk to these people. I know they're legit people. They're like real G's, and they're like, "Hey, if you're ever here, then hit me up, right? We'll hang out." And likewise, I tell them, if you ever come to Sydney, Australia, like hit me up, right? We're bros or sisters, right? Because you're either a Kong or a ZenApe, right? So yeah, I mean, this kind of level of what you would call brotherhood or sisterhood, it's quite unprecedented. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. And it's something you see across like, many communities as well, especially the more well-known ones, like Kongs, like ZenApes, or like, Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example. So yeah, I mean, there's this very strong potential for establishing human connection using Web3 technology and utilizing the power of community.
So what's happening in your world in terms of the utility of the ZenApe? Is there anything that you can share with the audience that you guys are working on that's not confidential? Or?
Sure, absolutely. So we minted in December, right? Early December. Minted means we sold out the NFT, and we sold out in like a few minutes, literally, which was nice, of course. It was very cool. And from that time, we've been building, furiously according to our so-called roadmap. So basically what we have planned to release. And also in that time, we also built zentask.xyz, right? Zentask.xyz, that's the URL, that's the website, zentask.xyz, but we'll just call it Zentask. What that is, it's a social/business networking decentralized application based around trust networks. So what that seeks to solve is that in this space, it's very challenging to effectively find work or to find people to work for you. Because currently it's like you ask your friends, you ask your friend of friends, hey, do you know anybody who's an artist or who's a developer? Or do you know anybody that needs an artist or a developer? And you look around in Discords, searching for talent. It's very, very like backwards, like old school 16th century stuff. So with Zentask, we aim to solve that issue. And also it allows us to create value on a much larger scale by activating those network effects, which are so prevalent in Web 2. Like, you know, Facebook and Instagram, millions and millions of users. But in Web 3, like typical NFT collection has maybe 5K users or something like that, 5K members, 10K members. It's very challenging to activate network effects simply from the thousands. So with Zentask, adhering to our principle of openness and bringing people together, we'll be able to combine all those different NFT communities together into almost like a Zentask confederation. And from there, also branch out into the wider crypto sphere as well.
So it's very interesting.
And of course,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And of course, there's the VX breeding that we're doing as well. So we're doing a 10K VX collection that can be created from your ZenApes. So if you own 2 ZenApes, once you accumulate enough tokens, you'll be able to breed a ZenApe VX. So that's, you know, it's like a sculpture. It's art. It's games, gamification. And I think for a lot of viewers, that second utility that I talked about, it's going to sound weird, but yes, hopefully, yeah, more will understand soon. Yes.
Sure, absolutely. I just wanted to say, so the Zentask almost sounds like a Web3 LinkedIn sort of platform.
Yes, it has been described as such, and we sometimes call it that as well. It shares many similar characteristics with LinkedIn, but it's, yeah, you could call it that, but then again, it's like I'd say it's different enough to be something of its own unique value proposition. I think where it differs from LinkedIn is that LinkedIn is about like flashy photos of people in suits and their corporate smiles and all of that, and like, oh, here's my resume, 1 year and 6 months here and this and that. But Zentask caters much more to pseudonymous identities. So in this space, a lot of people choose to be anonymous, right? For whatever reason. It doesn't mean that they're, you know, that they're bad people or anything. Like some people just like it, right? Like many of the most well-known people, well-known names in Web3 are actually anonymous. Like on Twitter, they've got tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers, but we don't know who they are. But they're real legit people that are trustworthy and do create a lot of value, whether they're coders or artists. So Zentask will enable, you know, people like that to create profiles and to build their own trust networks without having to reveal, without having to fully dox themselves with like a photo and a full name, like all of those identification stuff, right?
Completely. And that I can completely understand with why some people would choose to want to keep their privacy. You know, as we see some of these more mature Web 2 platforms evolve, it creates a whole lot of issues around privacy. So some people, I completely respect that. So I appreciate that you've actually developed a platform that can build a trust network, but still maintain a level of privacy as well. So you can still build your credibility, build your brand, but remain completely anonymous. So that's amazing. So this has been a very unique episode compared to some of our other episodes. So hopefully the audience can understand where I'm coming from, because I really do believe that Web3 and NFTs are going to be a huge part of our lives. It's probably really early days in terms of the Wild West where we're at in terms of this technology. But just like Facebook was, 10 or 15 years ago, at some point it's going to hit the masses and become more and more prevalent in our lives. We can already see a lot of big brands going into this space already. There's a whole lot of rumors around Disney getting involved in the NFT space. There is major companies like Walmart, like JP Morgan, big banks that are getting involved in the space, big fashion brands. So I think it's really here to stay. And I think the utility of NFTs are going to play a huge part of our lives, sometimes even without even knowing about it. It's going to be this technology that's going to be used, because the underlying technology behind the NFT is the smart contract. So how about, just as we're closing, you just give us a quick rundown on what the smart contract is and what implication it has for the everyday person as we progress in this technology.
So yeah, you're absolutely correct in saying that NFTs are going to be a huge part of our lives, sometimes without us even knowing about it, just like the internet, right? So now you've got the internet freaking everywhere, Internet of Things, internet there, everything's connected to something one way or another, even your car, your washing machine. And yeah, the NFTs are going to be the same thing. The potential for use cases for NFTs are endless. And it can be from anything from real estate to physical merchandise to to tracking of food sources, for example. Now, underlying all of that, as you mentioned, is the smart contract, right? So as an example, when people pay millions of dollars for a CryptoPunk, and people kind of mock it and say, oh, you just paid millions of dollars for like a pixel character, for a pixel figure. Like, it's just completely bizarre, right? I don't get it. Well, actually, what they're really paying for, yes, it's technically the picture, but actually more so they're also paying for the underlying code. So of that CryptoPunk, for example, like CryptoPunk number 200, right? We'll say that, right? So underlying that is a smart contract for the entire collection of CryptoPunks that exists on the blockchain. So all the records of ownership and transactions of where that CryptoPunk went and came to and who bought it and who sold it, it's there forever as long as that blockchain exists, as long as the Ethereum blockchain exists. So like when you buy ZenApe, for example, it's like not only are you buying the art, but you're also buying the code, the underlying code. As it's popularly said, the art is in the code and the code is in the art, right? So the smart contracts define everything in cryptocurrency, in Web3, in NFTs. They define how a cryptocurrency works. They define its tokenomics. They define how an NFT works. What the NFTs can do, what its utilities are, for example. Yeah, so, some NFTs can unlock access to certain things, unlock access to websites, and that's all in the underlying code, the smart contract, hence the term smart contract.
And so from my perspective as well, to add on top of that, it's almost a way of trustless transactions. It's like it's almost like when you buy a house, you sign a contract and then you pass over ownership. But in future, buying assets, buying houses, buying cars could be a matter of just pulling out your smartphone and interacting with an app, and then the record of that purchase is then automatically transferred to the purchaser without having to sign anything, to read contracts. As long as there's a system, there's a process, it just makes it much more seamless. So I see a future in that vein. It's almost like now when we're pulling out phones for QR codes, as we're checking into places and whatnot. So in future, it could be when you buy these assets, rather than having or something like a house where you've got a title, a deed, reams and reams of paperwork to sign, lots of trees being consumed in the process as well. It could be a very simple interaction of dealing with the seller or the bank or the buyer, whatever it is, and just pulling out your phone, instantly transferring the asset to yourself in a way that's completely trusted by both parties, completely seamless.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another major aspect of smart contracts, is that it effectively removes the middlemen and allows for much more seamless, much less friction transactions between different parties. Right? So now if I buy or sell something to you, whether it's an NFT art or real estate backed by NFT technology, it's just a matter of us both signing the transaction, done. That's it. So, imagine a future like in Sydney. I go to opening inspection and I'm like, hey, this is a nice house. All right, deal, let's do it. And just get your phone out and sign a transaction, done, sold within 20 minutes, assuming you have the ETH for it. When they start selling houses.
Yeah. Undoubtedly, there'll be some form of cryptocurrency in our ethos or in our ecosystem at some time in the near future, for sure. I think that's where the future is headed, whether it's a CBDC or a central bank version of a crypto or some of these other decentralized ones. But let's see what the future holds.
Exactly. Absolutely.
George, I really appreciate your time. If people are fascinated by this, almost it's going to be very, very new for a lot of the audience, but if they want to reach out to you, how can people find you?
Yeah, if anybody that wants to contact, they can find me via the ZenApe email, contact@zenape.io. Yeah. And just ask for George.
Awesome.
Easy.
And I always like to close my podcasts with asking this final question. So if there's one thing that you can do for your Zen today, what would it be?
One thing that I could do for my Zen today, what would it be? That's a good question. One thing that I could do for my Zen today, what would it be? I would say read more. Yeah, that's it. Just read more.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Get educated. I'm a huge advocate of educating ourselves, learning, having that learner mindset, growth mindset. Fantastic advice. George, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Kriben. See ya. Bye.